Hey, this is Eddie Muller. I am back for our, what is this, Ann, our third installment?
Third.
Okay, third installment of Ask Eddie. I'm very pleased that these have been popular, and I am joined here by Ann Hockens, Director of Communications for the Film Noir Foundation. And people have submitted some pretty good questions. I haven't previewed all of them, but I know I scanned it, and there's a couple of really good things in here that I'm eager to talk about. So um, let's get to it. It's only like 100 degrees here. I just smell smoke everywhere. I'm outside in my lounge here. And yeah, besides the fact that it seems like the world is ending, I'm really eager to talk about movies. So let's get it on.
It's time. Okay, this is from Kevin. Sorry, my other cat's tail is going over the questions, in case you're wondering why I'm struggling with them. When you're able to reschedule Detroit and other satellite festivals, will you be able to show portions of the international program you showed in SF and had originally intended for 2020? Is there any other means of showing at least portions of the international program remotely by streaming?
That is certainly our intention. I would love to finish the program that I started in 2020, the international program. So I'm not sure exactly how it's going to work. I have programmed an entirely new festival on the off chance that we're able to get back in 2021 in January at the Castro Theater, which at this point looks highly improbable. So we'll figure it out. I just, like I've mentioned a couple of times before, it's very difficult to arrange some kind of streaming alternative because the rules are totally different for theatrical exhibition and streaming. And whereas a one-off screening of a 35 millimeter film is something that is easily, I say that now,
Oh, yeah.
so easily arranged, it's obviously much more difficult to arrange rights for things streaming because people now spend a lot of money to get those streaming rights, you know, whether it's Criterion or some other service. You know, there are deals made for these films that prevent you from showing them on some other platform. We'll touch on this, I'm sure, as we go along. I'm sure it's not the last time I'm going to hear a question like this.
So Robert asks, for when we get back to having festivals, how about a Spanish noir festival of films with English subtitles?
That would be interesting. It wouldn't. I don't think it would play in every market that we're in. I don't know how extensive it would be, but it's something I would love to do. It's a little difficult. I mean, it's funny. Sometimes I show movies and people say, "Oh, what's the big deal? That's on YouTube," and it's like, well, it's on YouTube this big with no subtitles. So good on you if you speak Spanish, but otherwise, it's going to be a challenge. So that is something that I would love to do because I think a lot of the Spanish language cinema, whether it's from Mexico or from Argentina or from Spain, you know, those are the three big ones. There's a lot of really, really good stuff there. So yeah, that's a possibility. The bigger question remains, are we ever going to go back to the movies?
Yeah.
I wish I had an answer.
Me too. I miss the theatrical experience and seeing movies with other people. So John Noe asked, what are your top 5 American films that you want the foundation to restore?
Always a tough question because I don't like to answer this because then if I'm unable to do it, I feel like I've failed, when if I never told you in the first place, you wouldn't be any the wiser. I do know that we have gotten a grant from the Hollywood Foreign Press Association's Charitable Trust to restore Cy Enfield's B movie, The Argyle Secrets, and that is going to happen. In fact, the money just appeared in the bank to make that happen. So I'm very excited about that. I'm looking at, you know, just in case there are people watching this for the first time or they're new to the foundation or something, I just want to explain, you won't hear me mention, you know, well-known and famous titles when I talk about things we're going to restore, because our thing is to really go after orphan films, and those are films that aren't owned by a major studio. So we're always looking for the ones in the cracks. So something like Canyon City, which was an Eagle Lion film that came out in 1949, shot by John Alton, the Prison Break movie, written and directed by Crane Wilbur. That's really good. Odds are we could actually work with the Library of Congress to restore that film. So that's definitely a possibility. I would love to work with Universal, and we've talked about this, restoring the film Flesh and Fantasy, which is, you know, it's borderline noir. It's one of those fantastic noirs like Alias Nick Beale or Repeat Performance or something. But it's a film that I really love, and I've shown it at the Noir City festivals in 2 pieces because it's an anthology film with 4 different stories, and Universal cut out the first story and made it a standalone film called Destiny that was released in 1944, the year after Flesh and Fantasy. And I think it's possible to reassemble the film the way Julien Duvivier, the director, intended. And I've had talks with Universal. I've had a brief discussion with Peter Becker at Criterion about the possibility of that becoming a project. I've talked to people at TCM about making a big deal out of restoring the film the way Duvivier meant it to be. So that's something that is definitely on the burner that I hope comes to pass. There was another one that I thought of that just slipped my mind. If I think of it, I'll let you know. But I'll leave it at that right now.
Okay.
And if anybody, I always welcome people who have ideas. Oh, the other film was Please Murder Me with Angela Lansbury and Raymond Burr. We have located materials for that at the British Film Institute, and that would be an interesting film to restore. Have you ever seen that, Ann?
No, but I'm just intrigued by the fact that they both played detectives on television, you know, in their later careers.
Yes, and it is interesting because Please Murder Me is sort of like Raymond Burr's trial run at Perry Mason.
Ah.
He plays an attorney who is defending a woman accused of murder. That's Angela Lansbury.
Yeah.
And it's not a hugely inspired film in terms of its visual style and direction and everything, but it's a really pretty good script, and it's kind of historically significant just to see Angela Lansbury and Raymond Burr in the mid-50s, and this was definitely Raymond Burr's transition from playing heavies to playing leading men. I mean, he has a love affair with Angela Lansbury in this film, and so he's the svelte Raymond Burr by this point. You know, he's lost the weight so that they'd say, this guy could be Perry Mason.
No, sorry. Little cat problem. Let me just,
this is why I closed the door and I didn't let them in.
Yeah, I don't, unfortunately, I kind of don't have that option in my apartment. Okay.
They run wild.
They do, and they're just very restless tonight. This is from John. Would you be able to make sorry. Would you be able to make an online version of the first 3 Noir City annuals available to buy on the Film Noir Foundation website, or are there copyright issues that are keeping this from happening?
Wow, that's an interesting question. To be honest, John, I hadn't even thought of it. So that's interesting. I mean, we obviously make back issues. There she is. Charlotte appears.
No, this is the good twin.
Oh, okay. Oh, I see. They are twins. Oh, yeah. Interesting.
I was thinking an evil twin and a good twin, honestly.
Okay. Olivia de Havilland in The Dark Mirror.
Exactly.
um, what I was, John asked about well, we make back issues of the Noir City e-magazine available on the website. So I suppose we could make, PDFs of the whole annual available. But I was thinking that at some point we would do like a best of anthology, culling material from all of the annuals that are now out of print.
Yeah.
And I do make a point of telling people, when they're gone, they're gone. I mean, which is great. I love the sell through on these things, and it's nice to make a little bit of money on them because it's an ancillary thing to what we do. I mean, it's part of the educational aspect of our mission. That's why we have our nonprofit status, because not only are we restoring films, but there is an educational aspect to what we do, which the magazine and the annuals are a huge part of, and it's a nice little supplementary income stream for us. But anyway, the answer to John's question is we're going to definitely take that under consideration, because I think that's a pretty good idea. So
I think
thanks, John.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I was really excited when that question came in, because I thought it was a good suggestion. And this is from Marcia. What can you say about the film The Come On with Ann Baxter and Sterling Hayden? I saw it years ago and would like to see it again, but it seems to have disappeared from circulation. We screened it.
We have screened it, yeah, and it's like one print. There's one print left, and it's we get in that trick bag of we're the only ones in the world screening it, and it's the only print, and every time we run it through a projector, we're helping kill the film.
Yeah.
So that's a little problematic. The Come On is exactly like the previous question that John Noe asked about what films would you like to restore? I'd love to restore The Come On.
Yeah.
A little complicated because I believe it's owned by Paramount. And for a while there, Paramount was really getting good about making sure that they had at least had a scan of every negative in their library. I'm not certain about The Come On, but that's a real interesting mid-50s noir. It doesn't look like film noir at all. It's sort of set in, you've seen it, right?
Yeah.
With Ann Baxter and Sterling Hayden, and it's set in I think it's set in the Caribbean. John Hoyt is great in it too. And it's a really fun script. So yes, it is not extinct, but it's going to take a little finagling to get that one back in circulation. So I'm putting it on the list. It was on the list, and we'll see where things stand now.
Yeah, because it's a really good film. I mean, I really enjoyed it. It was just, and I'm always, I like Ann Baxter. She's not one of my favorites, but I really liked her performance in that. It's up there with her. She did a Columbo episode that she's really great in.
Everybody did a great Columbo episode, right? Ann Baxter is what I call kind of sneaky sexy.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, if you believe things you hear about her in real life, she was very sneaky sexy. I've heard some pretty amazing stories about Ann Baxter. But yeah, that's really great. And she and Hayden are great together. And it's a clever script, and that film deserves to be revived. Definitely.
And you get to see Hayden in swim trunks.
I just got a huge French Grand poster from The Come On that has Sterling Hayden and Ann Baxter in their swimming suits on the poster. It's the least noir looking poster in my collection, but it's pretty good.
Yeah, it's good. It's a steamy movie. Rory Rollin asks, is there still a black and white version of The Man on the Eiffel Tower available?
I'm confused by that question because the movie's in color.
Oh, okay. Well, that's why there's not a black and white version. It's not colorized. It was shot in color.
I think it was like some like Ansco color or something like that. But it's a color movie, which was kind of one of the big selling points about it when it came out. It was because it's all that location shooting in Paris in color. was kind of a big deal. So it'd be nice to see that film restored. It's not high on my list of things to restore because it also costs a lot more money to restore color in black and white. But what I always say to people who say, I don't believe that this movie is film noir because it's in color, I would say, then just turn the color off on your monitor and watch it in black and white. And then tell me that Vertigo isn't a film noir.
Or Leave Her to Heaven.
You know, I mean, why in the world you would want to turn the color off on Leave Her to Heaven or Vertigo,
So
I have
beautiful.
no idea, because the whole thing is about the color, right?
Yeah.
But yet those scripts and the themes are very, very noir. And, you know, so Man on the Eiffel Tower, it's a Georges Simenon story. It's not really a particularly good movie, I don't think. I think production was kind of a mess.
Yeah.
But as far as I know, I didn't know there was a black and white version. I've only known a color version of that film.
This is from Roger. Are there any plans to release 4K or even 1080p Blu-ray discs of Narrow Margin and the Threat, perhaps with outstanding Eddie Muller commentaries, which are now only available on low definition DVDs? If not, why not for these film noir classics? So.
Well, everything in the world is up in the air right now because of the transition to streaming and all that stuff. I will say this, the odds of your seeing those on Blu-ray with my commentaries that's not going to happen. But I wouldn't be at all surprised if you did see a Blu-ray version of The Narrow Margin at some point. You may have noticed that Warner Brothers just reissued a 4-film package of noir movies, really good noir movies, Out of the Past and Murder My Sweet and a couple other things that were titles from the very first volume of the Warner Brothers Film Noir collection that they did, man, I don't know, like 18 years ago or something, right?
Guys, been that long?
Case in point, though, the film not in that set is The Asphalt Jungle, because now The Asphalt Jungle has been licensed to Criterion for their streaming service, so Warner Brothers could not include it in this package of films that they just issued. So this is the kind of thing that's going on. But I have it from very good authority that they're looking at this. They're trying to update a lot of the Warner Brothers library. A big factor in this is the purchase of Warner Media by AT&T, which of course also affects me because Turner Classic Movies is part of that whole deal. So we're now all part of the same empire. And I know that a big factor in all of that is HBO Max, that streaming service, which apparently is going to have a classic, or does have a classic film section to it, in which they're going to have maybe 100 titles at any given time. Those have to be HD. HBO won't show anything that isn't HD. So the question is whether they're going to remaster films that they have in the collection so that they can play on HBO Max. And if that's the case, then yes, they will be available in 1080 and high def and all that. So fingers crossed on
that. Doug, who tags himself as Laura's husband. Sorry.
I know Doug. Yeah.
The last name.
I actually know what that means. Okay.
Okay, good. Did you, oh yeah, I love this question. Did you complete your homework assignment, that was from our first Ask Eddie, and watch No Name on the Bullet? What are thoughts? And do you think Audie would be good in noir?
I still have that to look forward to, Anne. I'm sorry to tell you. Yeah, I know it's funny. He calls it my homework assignment. Doug, you have no idea how much homework I actually have. If the day that I get to sit down and just watch a movie for fun, I look forward to that. That hasn't happened in a while. Audie Murphy was in The Gun Runners. Have you seen The Gun Runners?
I'm so happy because I had not been able to track down a copy, but is now available.
Yeah, I mean that's the
I'm
breaking
excited.
point. It's another version of The Breaking Point, and it is not anywhere near as good as the John Garfield version. So
I'm
yes,
sure it's
trying
not.
to compare Audie Murphy to John Garfield is no, that's not going to happen. But I will get to it, and you'll be the first person to know, and I'll tell you what I think, and then Doug, you'll be next. I'll call you and tell you what I think of Audie Murphy. No Name on the Bullet.
It's really great. And I'll go ahead and pipe in about the second question. Do you think Audie would have been good in noir? And my answer is yes. And when you see No Name on the Bullet, you'll know why. And also, Siegel wanted him to play the killer in Dirty Harry.
Really?
Yeah, they had worked on 2 films together prior to that. And but he died in the plane crash.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, hard to believe anybody could outdo Andy Robinson in Dirty
Great
Harry.
performance.
He is tremendous in that film.
Yeah.
He's great in everything, but man, he is scary in that movie.
He's actually really great in Hellraiser.
Okay, haven't seen it. But I love him in Charlie Varick. He's great in Charlie Varick too.
Yeah, he is. He's really good in that. Let's see. Oh, this is from Fran. Oh, this is great. I really liked this question.
Okay, let's have it.
I would like to know what the filmmakers did to see the shot in black and white. It seems it would be really difficult to set up a shoot and see it as it was, but knowing the film would be black and white. What device or technique was used for the director to see in black and white? Did they just rely on reviewing film after shooting, then reshooting what they wanted to change?
Great question. Great question. So I'm going to be honest. I did see that question, and I really did my homework because I had an idea what the answer to this was, but I wanted to be accurate. So I contacted my pal John Bailey, the cinematographer who was the recent president of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. And I asked John about this, and he sent me a huge email that I won't read, but he explained the whole thing. And cinematographers shooting in black and white used a thing called a panchromatic viewing glass, and it enabled them to look at a color scene and it would translate it into the grayscale so that they could see where things didn't properly separate. So if that couch and that thing were too close on the grayscale and it was washing together and they needed to separate, then the solution back then was to throw light at it, right? So they would backlight the sofa, or they would change the light to differentiate everything, which is why when you watch these old black and white movies, they have the cinematography is so vibrant and there's such a luster to it and it has so much depth. It's because they're using the lights to separate the planes, foreground, middle ground, distance, and separate objects in the screen with light. And he told me, and this I found very interesting, he said, when everything made the transition to color, a lot of the old school cinematographers were really a bit at sea because they weren't used to distinguishing objects just on the basis of color. So they would overlight things like, well, we have to put a backlight on this, we have to put a key over here, we have to do this, because it was second nature to them. And you don't really have to do that when you're shooting in color. The color itself separates objects, right? And it was very interesting. He said that it was actually European cinematographers who sort of led the way. Raoul Cotard, who photographed the Truffaut and Godard movies, and Sven Nykvist and Nestor Almendros and there were a couple of others who really understood we don't have to overlight because
Yeah.
the color is doing the job for us. If you watch Godard's Pierrot le Fou, you'll see like incredible color cinematography without a lot of lighting in it. So that was it. Yeah, it was a panchromatic viewing glass is what they would look through to make those distinctions. They didn't just wait until they saw the rushes.
And this one's from Morgan Jones. What are some great noirs that have a diverse cast?
I'm not sure whether he means noirs of the classic era or because they're not going to be too many.
Yeah.
And I guess by diverse, he just means multi-ethnic casts, multiracial casts.
And I think probably in classic noirs since.
Yeah, well, there just aren't too many. I mean, there's Odds Against Tomorrow and there's No Way Out. And the thing that's problematic about all of that, of course, is that those films, that's the point of the films.
Right.
The racial stuff is the point of the film. It's not just like, we're getting to the point now, finally, where characters can just be whatever, right? And it's not critical to the plot, but that has changed because you see a lot more of it in neo-noir, stuff like Deep Cover and One False Move, obviously Devil in a Blue Dress. I wish there was more, but there really isn't for, I hate to say, obvious reasons.
Yeah. So Mitch asked, I feel that Cornell Woolrich is one of America's greatest writers. He's even mentioned among the great writers in Nicatuso Noir as William Irish. Where would you rate him in the noir writers pantheon?
He is the greatest writer of dreadful suspense ever. I mean, nobody came up with hooks and greater premises for stories than Cornell Woolrich. He didn't always pay him off because they got a little twisted by the end, and sometimes they weren't very satisfying by the conclusion. But yeah, I mean, it's funny. I just wrote a big thing about Woolrich that'll be coming out next year, and he's absolutely extraordinary. But the thing about him that is distinctive is I always refer to his books as suspense instead of thrillers because there is that palpable sense of dread in his stories that edges them, like, I don't want to say they're toward horror but they're just dreadful. I mean, that's the thing about his stories. It's like horrible things happening to people that don't deserve it. And there's a suspense to that that's different than a thriller, where it's just like really exciting reading. There's always something. There's this dreadful undertow with Cornell Woolrich that is, that he is the master of that style of storytelling.
Yeah, and I think also with him, it's like the more you read him, like the more that feeling increases, because some of his stories, things turn out okay, and some of his stories, things that turn out horribly. I mean, really, really badly. And he would kind of, use the same premise in more than one story, and then those stories would actually end different ways. So it was just always giving me that really fatalistic feeling that the world is just chance and anything can happen to you.
Exactly. Now I have to say, I can't reveal everything, but I just learned today, I'm very excited about this. I just learned today that a very, very rare Cornell Woolrich film is being restored at one of the major studios. It was a missing film for years and years and years, and I'm trying to orchestrate a world premiere of this restoration on TCM, but I can't talk about it yet. I've been asked not to talk about the thing. So but it's great. I love it when this stuff happens. Like you think it's gone and then it's like, nope, we got it. So that's good.
Yeah, no, it's exciting when we find lost things.
Like my car keys.
Yeah, exactly. So Gordon Kitt, who by the way does the Kitt Noir Film Festival at Columbia University every year.
Oh yeah.
Asks, what is the significance of and why is there a prevalence of Asian motifs, from Asian style artworks, ceramics and furniture to Asian clothing, food, characters and locations throughout noir films, even though the genre's origins are German expressionism and Jewish immigrants to Hollywood from Eastern Europe?
Interesting question. I wonder if he watched my when I showed Three Strangers on TCM recently, and I got into the whole thing about Kuan Yin and how many times that Chinese goddess appears in movies, and there's this fellow named Steve Weston who's made it like his avocation to document every appearance of Kuan Yin in a Hollywood movie. My very practical answer to that question is that the movies are by and large Hollywood movies. They're made in Hollywood, and Los Angeles is on the Pacific Rim. I mean, there is you're going to find far more of an Asian influence in California than you're going to find on the East Coast or anywhere else outside of Asia, probably. So it's always been an easy way to depict exoticism.
Yeah.
And the whole idea of mystery and intrigue and all that, when it's like Geiger's house in The Big Sleep, it has all these Asian motifs, and to me that's like the classic example of, it's in LA, but it has this, and the whole it has to look mysterious and foreboding, and I just think that's it, and you get that more. I don't know what the term would be, you don't see it. You're not going to see Byzantine art in Los Angeles to the same degree that you see or Asian art, So I really think that's kind of it. And you really see that a lot. Like if you read Hammett's stories, set in San Francisco, there's just all of this Asian, Chinatown and the alleyways and the mystery of, this is a totally different culture within this culture.
Yeah.
And I can't offer any more of an explanation than that.
It's a good one. So John Burley asks two questions. One, in Dark City, and these are related to another question. Okay. In Dark City, you seem backhandedly dismissive of the late Raymond Chandler. What is your opinion now of The Long Goodbye? And adjacent to that, what is your opinion in the movie of The Long Goodbye? And then another person asks.
So there's a whole different. Should I do those first?
Yes, do those.
Okay. I know what he means, that it seems like I'm a little dismissive of Chandler, but I'm not dismissive. I'm not. And I'm certainly not dismissive of Chandler's books. The Little Sister and The Long Goodbye are my two favorite Raymond Chandler novels. Yeah. I think The Long Goodbye is his absolute masterpiece. The reason it came off that way, perhaps in Dark City, is because I was writing about Hammett and then writing about Chandler. and I was drawing comparisons between the two of them as people,
Yeah.
and as, you know, just what they were like, you know. And I do have my issues with Raymond Chandler, just based on, you know, I know a lot about Raymond Chandler. I've read everything there is about Raymond Chandler, and I just, you know, I didn't want to just. I understand his huge influence. He probably has led more people to become writers of crime fiction than any other writer ever.
Yeah.
Which is fantastic. But I'm not an acolyte. You know, I try to see these things clearly, and the guy had a lot of flaws as a person, and that doesn't make me think any less of his work, you know, or him, honestly, because I'm really fascinated by people who achieve amazing things by overcoming their personal obstacles. I mean, the guy was an unhappy man. He was a mean alcoholic. He had horrible relationships with women. He was, if today, Raymond Chandler wouldn't survive 1 minute in the Me Too world.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, he was so inappropriate with women, embarrassingly so. So, you know, I'm just, I was going to say, I was just going to call a spade, but that would be the wrong analogy in this case.
Yes.
Anyway, so there was another question about the what do I think of The Long Goodbye, the movie? Was that the question?
Yeah.
I used to hate it. When I was a big Chandler fan when I was young, and I remember when the movie came out, you know, its initial release of the film, and I liked the Jack Davis movie poster, but I did not like the movie at all for obvious reasons. You know, I was now into noir. I was recognizing film noir. I was falling in love with all those actors, and Elliot Gould was not my idea of Philip Marlowe, right? But then, you know, years pass and I see the film for what it is, and it was Altman's complete revisionist thing of just like, if you transpose that ideal, if you transpose Chandler's ideal of the knight errant hero to 70s Los Angeles, the guy is a complete anachronism. He's totally a man out of time.
Yeah.
And that's a perfectly valid approach to the material. I think people who hate the movie they're not reviewing the movie. They're hating the fact that it's not the book of The Long Goodbye. It's not what you feel when you read the book. And, you know, I've always said, if they blew their chance, Paramount should have made The Long Goodbye in 1954 with William Holden as Philip Marlowe. And it there you go. It would have been classic, you know.
Yeah.
But that didn't happen. So you got Robert Altman and Elliot Gould and Sterling Hayden.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
And and what was odd for me when I saw the film was I really don't like Robert Altman. And it was kind of weird, like Elliot Gould, you know, I loved it immediately. It's actually one of my favorite neo-noirs. I was so surprised, you know, when you're talking about the anachronism, you know, like the car he drives, like that was such an incredible symbol because it's so out of place. And I love the ending. I won't spoil it. I was surprised by it. So Doug asks, 3 films based on Raymond Chandler's Marlowe novels, Marlowe, The Long Goodbye, and Farewell, My Lovely, Dick Richards' Farewell, My Lovely. What's your personal take on those 3 films?
It's time for me to revisit the Paul Bogart Marlowe with James Garner, because again, the first time I saw that movie, I was in the process of falling in love with old films.
Yeah.
And so the James Garner one held no visual appeal for me. It just looked mundane compared to the, compared to Out of the Past or something like that. So I had no interest in it whatsoever. Now I think I can watch movies from the 60s and they have their own visual look, right? And so I'm going to go back and look at that again. I've said about The Long Goodbye, I like the film. I think it's a commentary on Chandler. It's not really an adaptation of Chandler. So I accept it as that. Farewell, My Lovely, I have always had a problem with, just because I know Mitchum from the 40s movies, and
Yeah.
it was very hard for me, and it still is, to watch that movie and realize this guy made these movies in the original era.
Mhm.
And now it's 30 years later and they're asking him to play that part and he's 30 years older.
Yeah.
And it just, I could never get past that.
Yeah.
And I also think that, there's a lot to like in that film. I like David Shire's score. I like John Alonzo's cinematography, although I think it's overdone. It compared to Chinatown, it's a cartoon version of the 40s, well, Chinatown was the 30s, but you get my point. I think it's overripe. Farewell, My Lovely is overripe for me. That's all.
Susan, can we talk about the often optimistic endings of many noir films? Personally, I like the characters' lives to all end in death or destruction. I'm kind of on board with her. I cringe at contrived and plausible hopeful scenes. I'm guessing this was a studio requirement, but it certainly messes with an otherwise dark plot. Your thoughts and recommendations?
Well, did she say my recommendations?
Yeah, I guess recommendations for ones with dark endings, I assume.
Turn it off, but a minute before it ends. That's my recommendation, right? If you don't like the optimistic ending, just turn it off before it ends. This is complicated. I think in many cases these BS endings kind of they can spoil a movie, but they don't ruin the movie. At least that's the way I look at it, And it's funny that she came up with this question, because it seems like virtually every movie I introduce on TCM, I'm addressing this subject. Like, how many times the movie ends and then I come on and I say, well, that wasn't the real ending of this movie.
Yeah.
And then you have to explain how it was really supposed to end. But, something that I think people overlook, and I just recorded an intro for TCM yesterday, where I made this point. People need to realize that back in that day, every movie was all ages admitted, right? And so the Production Code Administration, their job was to spare people paying money to go to the movies the embarrassment of bringing their kids to a movie and then having it be really, really inappropriate for that age, because there was no rating system, right? It was the movie Night Editor, right? Which has really, really perverted stuff in it.
It really does.
And I said, can you imagine going to see this movie in 1946 and taking your kids? And then all of a sudden, the guy's getting, the woman's getting killed with the tire iron, and Janice Carter is like getting turned on, and she's like, "Oh my God, this is so exciting!" And it's like, how do you explain that to your kid? Daddy, isn't she getting killed? Why is this woman so excited? And it's like, wow. So that was kind of the purpose of the production code, but then it got ridiculous, because stuff like, you can't use suicide as a way out of the story because it's the church didn't believe it. It was against God to kill yourself. And it's like, how many of these stories are supposed to end with the guilty party realizing they're guilty and offing themselves, right?
Yeah.
But, you know, and it was so arbitrary because it all had to do with how well you could grease the production code office. I mean, look at a film like Humoresque,
Yeah.
you know, where Joan Crawford kills herself. You know, she walks
Yeah.
into the ocean at the end of that movie, and like, it's a fantastic scene.
Yeah.
You could, why did they get to do it? You
Yeah.
know, and yet you can't have, you know, they won't believe me. Robert Young is supposed to kill himself at the end of that movie, but they wouldn't allow it.
Yeah.
So they have him get shot by a bailiff instead. And it's like, how does that work?
Yeah.
You know? So yes, these things are problematic, but it's interesting to just look at them historically as like, isn't it interesting the way we thought about things, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, I think one of the most really crazy things that I've seen was, you know, Kane novels were getting very popular. So, you know, I can't remember the studio, but they optioned Serenade, which is, you know, Warner Brothers. Okay, yeah, which is about an opera singer who loses his voice because he's had a homosexual affair and he's freaked out about it, basically.
That is the plot, yes.
You know, and then he returns back to New York and the guy's there and all this stuff happens. And so, like, they cast it with Mario Lanza, and I was just like watching it, and it was just like, why did you option this story? You knew you couldn't even remotely do the story.
But they did that. I mean, the production code said that Postman Always Rings Twice would never get made. I mean, that was written in 1934. And I think it was Eddie Mannix bought that for MGM immediately as soon as the book came out. They didn't even care.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, this is hot stuff. We're going to figure this out eventually. And they did. You know, it's really not like the novel, but they figure these things out, you know. Yeah. And I don't know. I get what Susan is saying. Susan, I think.
Yeah.
But, you know, I was thinking about this the other day. I'm not a big fan of censorship, but I am a big fan of good taste. And so I like the fact that the production code was there. It made filmmakers think creatively. I like how they subverted the production code. I really didn't like when they demanded a different ending.
Yeah.
You know, because in many cases, it's like pulling the rug out from under the storytellers right at the finish line. And it can be frustrating.
Yeah, even though I have to admit that in the case of On Dangerous Ground, I actually liked that they changed what they were going to have the original ending be. But a friend accused me of being a romantic, which I guess I am. But
that's right, you know. Yeah, and then Nick Ray wouldn't shoot it.
Yeah,
you know, and so actually Ida Lupino and Robert Ryan blocked that whole thing out themselves. You know, the last scene where he comes back to the farmhouse and all that.
Yeah.
But you know, it doesn't kill me sometimes. You know, like I don't know. I'm not going to go through individual film by film, but sometimes I just kind of, you know, grin and bear it, I guess is the way to say it. I grin and bear it at the end of like Thieves Highway when, you know, he and Rika get together and drive off in the truck and all. And it's like, that was not the ending. That was not Bezzarides' ending. But, you know, it's just like, yeah, okay, we get it.
Okay. Sorry. It's going to, okay. I thought this was a good, well, it's another three-parter, but I thought it was really good.
Okay.
Aside from Detour, what notable noirs sprang from Poverty Row?
Well, that would depend on what you consider Poverty Row. You know, is Eagle Lion Poverty Row. I mean, a lot of people think Poverty Row Studios are anything that isn't one of the big 8 studios, right? But Eagle Lion, which grew out of PRC, the makers of Detour, was a lower budget studio. It was making B product, but I don't know if I'd consider it a Poverty Row studio, but there were some good things. Monogram certainly is considered a Poverty Row studio, and they did great stuff with the King Brothers. Suspense, Decoy is a really fun picture. I mean, in some ways you could say, Gun Crazy started as a Monogram film. That's a Monogram production that ended up being distributed by United Artists. So if you want to think of that as a Poverty Row production, there you go. It doesn't get better than that. But yeah, there were some good ones. I wish I could think of them right now off the top of my head, but Decoy is definitely one. And again, those Eagle Lion things, if you want to think of those as Poverty Row, or a lot of this stuff that Edward Small produced, because he was an independent outside of the studio system. So like guys like Eddie Small and Brian Foy at Eagle Lion, they produced a lot of really great films, Raw Deal and, T-Men. Those are tremendous movies that aren't studio productions, but are they Poverty Row? I don't know. That's just something to think about.
And I think the name of the book is Death on the Cheap.
Yeah, Art Lyons.
Yeah, which I think is, if you're interested in learning kind of more about low budget noir, I think that's a really
that's a great suggestion, Ann. Yeah. Art did a great job with that book, talking about the really obscure stuff. Hugh Beaumont and Money Madness, and I don't think you're going to find super classic films, but I love showing that stuff just to show how resourceful filmmakers could be.
Yeah, and I thought the year that we programmed the A and B films was great because it was an A film and a B film from the same year, and it really gave people a chance. I mean, besides the fact the films were great, but it also gave people a chance to kind of see how that worked, like what was going on in a big studio, and then what were these kind of secondary
or even the B unit at a major studio, like we love Quiet Please Murder. I mean, that's a 20th Century Fox film. It's just made by their B unit. I mean, all the studios had a B unit, RKO and Warner Brothers and Paramount B unit.
And it's not noir, but Val Lewton was really a B unit, and and those films are amazing.
So you see, we're blending this. You see why I have trouble answering this question, because Lewton was working for RKO, which was not a Poverty Row studio.
Exactly.
But he was working with a Poverty Row budget.
Mm-hmm.
And those, I love those films, and I'm going to be showing a couple of them on Noir Alley coming up.
Because he did do a Woolrich story.
Yeah.
So aside from John Garfield, can you mention actors or actresses who died too soon from the noir period?
All of them.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, everybody dies too soon. Okay. Laird Cregar.
Yeah.
26 years old. I'm sure most people listening know the Laird Cregar story, that he wanted a crash diet because he wanted to be a leading man, and he took a lot of drugs and died at 26. And his co-star in I Wake Up Screaming, Carol Landis, suicide at 29. Jean Gilly from Decoy, the star of Decoy, she was 34 when she died. Gail Russell, 37, drank herself to death. Helen Walker, I mean, she was 48, but that's way too young.
Yeah.
you know, a lot of booze figured in a number of these, but
Yeah.
anyway, those are like five that immediately popped to mind. Who were pretty significant actors, you know. Gail Russell was especially tragic, I think.
Well, she just had a terrible life. I mean, she just was a very unhappy person.
Yeah, she should never have gone anywhere near the movies, but she was just so beautiful. You know, yeah.
Yeah. You know,
Tragic
John Wayne
story.
was very kind to her.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it didn't matter. A lot of people were kind to her, but
Yeah.
it just didn't matter. She was in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a terrible business, especially for women. And, you know, you have to have,
You got to be tough. You got to be tough.
Yeah.
It's interesting how as we go on, my lighting is changing because now I'm getting much more noir lighting now.
It's actually really nice. It's sort of a shadow coming in.
Yeah, the sun is going down, and it's becoming obvious that I have a light here. Yeah.
And then this is also from Phil. What other actresses did you interview for Dark City Dames that did not make the final book?
Claire Trevor, who I did speak with, but then it was I couldn't, in good conscience, ask her to sit for the interviews like I did the other women because she had such horrible emphysema.
Yeah.
And I would have killed her just by interviewing her.
Yeah.
And she was very torn because she kind of wanted to do it, but it was like, oh, honey, I don't have the strength. That was sad. I would have loved to have gotten her in the book. Rhonda Fleming, that was a weird story because Rhonda just didn't want to talk about her personal life at all.
Yeah.
And Liz Scott, obviously, but you talked about not talking about a personal life. Liz Scott was she wasn't going to address any of the rumors that had always circulated about Liz Scott. So that wasn't going to happen. But of course, that if people are unfamiliar with that book, which I'm hoping will be coming back in a new edition next year, the prerequisite was that they had to be alive so that they could actually sit for interviews, which is why people said, why didn't you do Gloria Graham? Or, you know, she was already passed away. So these were all actresses who were alive at the time I did the book. Those were the three: Liz Scott, Rhonda Fleming, and Claire Trevor. I would have also liked to have included.
Yeah, and I just want to put out there that I think it's a really excellent book, and I'm not saying that because, you know, you're my boss. It really is an excellent book, and I think especially if you're interested in, you know, a woman's experience of Hollywood, you know, it's different, and it's really interesting because the women are very open and honest in their interviews with you, and yeah, I mean, it really is. I'm really happy it's gonna be back in print.
Thank you very much, Anne. I'm very that's the book that's closest to my heart of the ones that I've done, because it was a great learning experience. They were great people and they became very good friends, but they taught me quite a bit, and I was a different person after writing that book, for the better.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll do an easy last question. How's that?
Okay.
Who are your top 3 favorite noir villains?
Okay, let me see if I can, off the top of my head. I love Kirk Douglas in Out of the Past as Whit Sterling. I just think he is fantastic. I mean, that is how you bring it on camera. I mean, he is such a beautiful contrast to Mitchum, and to see those two guys together is fantastic. And Whit Sterling is a great noir gangster villain. I have to get a woman in here, so I'm going to say Gene Tierney in Leave Her to Heaven. I mean, she, you know, that is an amazing character,
Yeah.
and she is a villain, boy. She is the most psychotic villain maybe in all of film noir.
Yeah.
And I'll say, I'll go back to Mitchum. I'll say Mitchum I'll say Cape Fear. A lot of people would say Night of the Hunter.
Yeah.
But I think he's even scarier in Cape Fear. He's because you love Mitchum so much, right? You love him so much, and when he's being Robert Mitchum, and it's really unnerving to see him be evil, Robert Mitchum. You know, in Night of the Hunter, he's not really Robert Mitchum.
Yeah.
You know, he's another crazy berserk character that Mitchum plays. But in Cape Fear, he's Robert Mitchum. And it's like, whoo, boy, is that scary. So
yeah, and I'll be honest with you, I think that scene when he picks up the woman,
Barry Chase. Yeah.
Yeah, that honestly, I think is one of the most disturbing, frightening.
It is.
Because it's so grounded in realism. You know
yes,
what I mean?
I agree. And it's scary because, you know, you've seen the Scorsese version, right?
Honestly, I couldn't make it all the way through it.
Yeah, well, okay. But
Sorry.
To me, that's a classic, don't apologize. It's a classic example of comparing old school and new school, because the way De Niro plays that character, the character of Max Cady in the Scorsese version, he's such a freak.
Yeah.
He's such an outrageous freak that if you saw this guy coming, you would just run the other way, right? But the way Mitchum plays that part, it's like, hey, can I, you know, you're going to see meeting this guy in a bar and he'd be like, hey, can I buy you a drink? You know, and it's like, sure, this guy's cool, man. And then the next thing you know, he's cut your throat and stolen all your money. And it's, you know, it's horrifying. The De Niro one was like a berserk cartoon version of a villain. And the Mitchum one was genuinely scary.
Okay, so we're going to do this again?
Oh, absolutely. I thought there were more questions.
No,
okay.
That was the last question.
Okay. Excellent. Yeah, I'm looking forward to doing it again. There's some really good questions in there. It's fun. It's always fun. I wish I had more information for people, you know, about if we're going to resume screenings and all of this. But at this point, all I can say is, you know, we're watching the situation closely. There is interest in getting us back into venues, but it's obvious that it is really, really difficult economically, because if, like, you know, we would be doing the Chicago Festival at the end of this month, but they can only have 50 people in the theater at a time. The venue is open, but there's no way that it's economically feasible for us to do it for 50 people a show. It just can't be done. You know, I can't fly to Chicago and get a hotel, and we can't have all these film rentals and all of this stuff just for 50 people. I wish we could. And like I say, it's just not so easy to say, well, let's just switch it all over to streaming, because we can't get the films to stream. We can get them we can get a 35 film to show theatrically, but that doesn't mean you can just stream it.
Yeah.
So I got my fingers crossed. We'll see where it all leads. Anyway, I do want to say, though, just in closing out here, Ann, I really, really appreciate how supportive people have been of the foundation during this pandemic. I mean, we continue to get donations. We continue to have people just showing so much interest. You know, obviously there's a wonderfully synergistic thing that's happening with my TCM work and the foundation, and they kind of feed each other, which has worked out really nicely. So I'm very grateful to TCM for letting me promote the foundation through the show. But it's just, it's been really very heartening to see how much this stuff means to people, and that they're still willing to, you know, pony up some dough to keep us going here. So it's all good. I look forward to doing this again.
Yeah, me too. And I would also like to add my thanks to everybody that's continued to support us. And I really enjoy interacting with everybody on social media. I love it. I love it when people comment. And it's a really fun job. I mean, it's really fun to interact with people. And we have great people following us.
Yeah, absolutely true. Who knew? Who knew, right? That all these movies about alienation and paranoia and dread and misery and all this stuff have like the greatest fans, the nicest people in the world.
It's true.
Love this stuff. So that'll show you. That'll
It
show
will.
you. Okay, thanks a million, Ann.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Okay, we'll see you next time.